Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Bob Bailkoski in the studio, who is the CEO of Logicalis. How are we doing?
I'm good, thank you, Mark. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thanks for coming in. Funny enough, I actually said to you off air that when I looked at Bob Bailkoski, I was thinking, this guy's American. This guy must be American. But tell me a bit about the background of your name, because I was interested, and I think the listeners will be as well. So where's it come from, the heritage?
I'm from Manchester originally, but my grandfather came over from Poland to the UK, at the beginning of 1900s or something. And when he got to the border, he was illiterate, so couldn't read or write. And he articulated his name, Bronislaw Bailkoski, to the border guard, and the border guard guessed the spelling. So we are the only family in the world to have that surname Bailkoski spelt the way it is. We've actually tried to trace back the family tree, but we can't go easily, at least anyway, beyond my grandfather, so we're stuck at that level. But yeah, we're a family that has that surname in Manchester, and it's just us.
So you could make up what stories of your great-grandfather,
Exactly.
Could be anything,
Right,
there could be all sorts of stories going on. Bob, thanks for coming in the studio. I normally look at someone's LinkedIn profile and pick something about their career of why they started, but I initially looked at your degree and I thought, law and politics, why has Bob done that? So tell the listeners, what made you do this?
Well, look, when you're at that age of 17, 18, trying to think what degree you're going to do, it's a difficult decision to make. I based my decision on a television program in the 1990s called LA Law, which I thought was incredible. All these beautiful people up in court, trying to defend those poor innocent victims and so on. That's why I chose the degree. Obviously, I soon realised afterwards that the British system was nothing like the American system, and I was never going to be one of those beautiful people, so my career took a different path after that.
And what did you do then? What's your career after that?
So I left university in 1997, and I decided to join PwC to try to get like a broad business based understanding first of all. So I joined PwC, spent about 6 or 7 years with them, qualified as a chartered accountant. The beauty of that role with PwC was you had quite a diverse interaction with customers of PwC's clients of PwC's, but in diverse areas and diverse geographies. So I was fortunate enough that my wife and I spent about 2 years in Perth in Western Australia working for PwC, and then came back in 2003, 2004.
And then you joined. I actually looked this company up and I was thinking, is this the Wolseley, the hotel? When I actually looked at it, and when I looked at it, it's actually a heating firm, isn't it? So to tell the listeners how that came about, because that's, without being rude, Bob, that's not the sexiest industry to go into.
Wolseley owned operations in the UK like Plum Centre and Build Centre. These are organisations that sell building materials and plumbing and heating materials to the trade. You then come to yours and my house and implement those things. When I was thinking about my next career step from PwC out into industry, I always said to myself, I'm going to do something that really grabs me, that I'm really passionate about. And I never thought that would be joining an organisation that sold toilets. But anyway, that's what I did. And had a great time with them. It's actually a massive global organisation. It was then $30 billion in revenue, FTSE 100 business. One of those organisations that you've never heard of overall.
Yeah, £30 billion.
$30 billion. Yeah, wow. But even so, massive, whichever way you look at it, with operations in the USA and across Europe. And it's one of those, as I said, one of those companies you've never heard of. But the thing that I've really enjoyed in my time with Wolseley was that they gave me the opportunity to, again, have a diverse interaction with various functions. So although I was trained as a finance individual, I took a role with them as their head of European mergers and acquisitions, which is really, really interesting. I spent a few years working with Wolseley and with acquisition targets, buying them and so on. And then after a couple of years, we'd bought several businesses in continental Europe, and Wolseley said to me, why don't you actually go out and now manage those businesses? So I became the commercial and finance director for a new operation that Wolseley set up in Switzerland, managing their Central European businesses, and did that for a couple of years in Zurich.
So when you actually went to into that industry, it wasn't the industry, it was the role that attracted you to it. Were you always interested in getting more of a rounded role? Because when I speak to finance people, sometimes I normally think, oh, they're going to be dull. They're going to be really dull or difficult to speak to. But you're quite rounded yourself, so that's a compliment.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But is that something you wanted to get experience of, a bit more roundedness?
I don't think you can be effective in any role unless you have a broad understanding of how the business that you're working in works. And so if you approach your role in a very sort of myopic way, a short-sighted way, and only do the specific activities of your function, that's it, regardless of what else is happening in the rest of the organisation, then I think you're always going to be ineffective. So I've always tried to have that very broad perspective overall beyond finance, because finance is one of those output things rather than a driver behind the business. And you've got to understand what those inputs are in the first instance to be able to communicate to people what's happening in the numbers. So I've always had, or tried to have, that very broad understanding of what an organisation does and how it generates ultimately profits, so that I can tell the story to non-finance people of what's gone on from a finance perspective.
Absolutely. You left Wolsey. Talk about your journey after that. What happened?
Yeah, I came back to the UK in 2011, and then I was approached by TUI Travel, the travel agent company, again a big global organisation, to lead their sailing division, at least from a finance perspective, become the CFO of their sailing division. It was called TUI Marine, and to my fortune, it was based in Florida. So
wow,
my
brilliant.
wife and kids, we went overseas again, did another overseas stint, so Australia, Switzerland, and now Florida. We spent a couple of years in Florida, and that was more of a business transformation sort of activities, trying to make the business more relevant to its customers. They basically sold boat charters, whether that's canal boats, barges, or yachts. The main base was in the Caribbean, and that's why the role was based in Florida overall. That was transformation for a couple of years, making sure that the business utilised those assets in the best possible way. That was a lot of fun in Florida for part of the role, and then back in the UK for part of it. And then I was approached again by a London-based firm called Monetize. Monetize is, or was, it's been acquired subsequently, was a software company that created essentially the backbone that enables mobile banking to take place today. So back in the days, you had a Nokia phone, you were able to check your bank balance. They were the architects of the technology behind the scenes there. And that evolved into becoming the mobile technology used by UK high street banks today. Did a couple of years with them, and then ultimately was approached by another headhunter about the role in Logicalis to become the CFO, the group CFO for Logicalis, and that was back in 2015.
Were you interested in tech at that point? Was it something you were? Was it the role that attracted you? Were you interested in tech or the UK channel?
A combination of both of those things, but I'd always felt, leading up to that role with Logicalis, that the role of, at least my roles as finance leaders in organisations, I'd broadened to encompass IT as well. So to the the eternal dislike of the IT function, often they reported into me in those organisations. And so I've had a lot of interaction with IT challenges, both from a positive transformation perspective and also fixing things that have been broken for many years too. So I had that interaction, and I actually felt one of the attractions of the role at Logicalis was it gave me the opportunity, rather than to be at the end of the cycle as a ultimate end user, to go right to the front of the cycle and be in the partner world, dealing directly with the vendors and supporting customers on their journey. Because having been a customer myself, I knew what the pain points were, I knew what the difficulties were dealing with partners and with the vendor community. So I wanted to sort of have a bit of influence over that side of the house.
Logicalis in the UK, big organisation globally. When sort of Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure moved into your space, how did that affect business? Because revenues went down in the UK. So how did that? And did they blame the CFO then? Actually,
it wasn't my fault. No. So to be super clear, Logicalis is made up of 30 different countries around the world. UK is one of them. You're right. And back in 2015, when I joined as CFO, the threat of the public cloud players coming in and disrupting the traditional space from a technology partner's perspective was pretty severe. The threat, at least, was back in that time. And many of ours were trying to work out, how do we cope with this? Because it's going to be inevitable that some of our traditional business around implementing data centers for our customers, or even selling space in data centers that they might have managed themselves, own themselves to customers, was under threat. So what do they do about that? And that was certainly a threat at the time. I think we've dealt with that pretty well since then from a global perspective by working very closely with those public cloud providers and actually providing our customers with services that wrap around that public cloud space that they might have. Because one of the, if you think back to a decade or so ago, one of the promises of the public cloud was that it was going to simplify a lot of operations. And actually what's happened in reality is it's made things much more complex for a CIO to deal with, because they will always have their on-premise environment that they need to deal with, and now they've got this over their public cloud environment they need to deal with too. And I think it's actually perversely strengthened the role of partners rather than undermine the role of partners, in particular around managing that broader space and giving CIOs and clients more in-depth advice on how to get the most out of those two different environments that they have today.
Let's talk about managed services. Let's talk about what a VAR is, because let's talk about every UK business at the moment who's a VAR wants to be an MSP. That's what they're telling me. So they're all saying, oh yeah, we want to go into services, we can do full wraparound services, full managed services, but most of them can't. Explain to the listeners what you think is the difference between a VAR, a reseller that does services as an add-on, and actually a full managed service player in the UK, or in fact in the world.
Well, it's one of those questions where, depending on who you speak to, you get a different answer. But my way of looking at it is this. A classic VAR supplies the product, the hardware and the software, often implements it, and that's where the value comes, that's the professional services piece, and then occasionally offers the customer support and maintenance contracts to make sure that the product that they've implemented continues to run smoothly, and that's where the VAR stops. Sometimes with those support and maintenance contracts, they manage it themselves. Sometimes they let the vendor or other third parties do it. But that's where the VAR stops. Now, managed service providers extend it beyond the support and maintenance piece to offer additional services that the CIO might need to make sure that his environment runs smoothly. The classic one in that space is availability, monitoring the devices that are in a particular environment and making sure that they're available for the CIO overall. Those sorts of services are what the MSP world deliver regularly. And I'm not talking, by the way, here, Mark, about outsourcing as such. I'm not talking about taking a department of 200 people in an organisation and then giving it to a Kyndryl or something like that and letting them outsource and deliver it from India. That's not the sort of managed services that I'm talking about. I'm talking about discrete areas that customers think, actually, you know what, it's better if we don't use our valuable time and resources performing these things in-house, because they're more strategic things to focus on, and we'll give them to a partner like a Logicalis to manage for us. And that's classically in that monitoring space overall.
One of the feedback I get from customers about managed services companies is, I only hear from them when something breaks down, or if it goes wrong, I might get a phone call, or they suddenly say, oh, just to let you know, yeah, you had downtime of 2 hours. Pretty basic sort of stuff. Yeah. How do you differ? Do you, or in fact, do you do anything differ?
Well, I think the managed services market, in the sense that I just outlined it, is ripe for massive disruption, because too often managed service providers have done exactly what you said. The only interaction with the customer is when something goes wrong, and they send a report, table stakes report, every single month, or however long the SLA requires it, to the customer. Here's the availability stats of the device that we manage for you. CIO gets it, or IT manager gets it, straight in the drawer, does nothing with it, doesn't even read it, and it's a way of just satisfying the SLA. We've actually taken a different approach to this, and we looked at this many years ago and thought, how can we truly differentiate ourselves in the eyes of our existing customers and in the eyes of new customers? And so we've created this platform, which is a global platform that exists within Logicalis, that gives customers additional insights for the areas that we look after them. So, for example, of course, we give the standard availability stats that all other MSPs give to their customers. But in addition to that, we can give our customers on the environment that we monitor for them, stats on things like how efficient is that environment, how cost effective is it. So are there, for example, virtual machines over here that are running that actually don't need to be up 24 hours. And if you switch these off, you could save $1,000 a month. And we give those recommendations for free to our customers. But we go beyond that efficiency piece. We look at things like the security of the environment that we look after for them. We give them a score out of 10 on that. The user experience based on some full stack observability capability that we've got that indicates to the CIO how well the end users in their organisation are managing the applications that organisation is trying to push to them. And finally, and this is a critical one for Logicalis, we give them a score on sustainability, on the environmental implications of the environment that we run for them. In other words, what's the carbon footprint of that? And we give recommendations on how they can improve in all those areas: cost effectiveness, security, user experience, and sustainability. And those are all for free. And we've done this because we truly want to differentiate ourselves from our competition, but also we don't want to abuse the privileged position that we're in. We want to say to our customers, thank you for giving us this managed service contract. Here are some insights that you might not have realised until you asked Logicalis to manage the space for you. And we think that's kind of like an obligation for any managed service provider to give their customers the insights that they need that will make a difference in their organisation.
Because a lot of the times you'll get a customer and you'll hear from the managed service provider the moment they need to renew. Oh yeah, actually your renewals come up next month. Are you going to sign for another year? How does Logicalis put themselves in a position to be in that fight, to be in that discussion where they might change to you? Because you said about being disruptive, but you can only be disruptive if you're known and you're in the fight as well.
It's true, and for customer experience, CX is a big topic amongst all the vendors, has been for a couple of years. And really what they say when they mean CX is, how can we make sure when it comes time to renewal that the customer renews? Well, we look at that and say, that can't be the only time that you engage with the customer. You've got to have an ongoing dialogue with the customer throughout the period of the contract that you've got with them. And even if it's a SaaS deal that you've got with them, there needs to be regular interaction with them. If it's cancelable within a month, in other words, you need to have regular interaction with them. These metrics, these insights that we provide them with, give us the reason to go to the customer, to educate them on areas that they can improve, and actually gives the CIO or the IT director some important metrics that they can take to their boss, often the CEO or sometimes the CFO, to say, look, if we did these things, we'd be able to improve the cost of the environment, we'd make it cheaper. Security is a massive concern for everybody. Sustainability is a massive concern for most organisations these days as well, and also user experience too. So it gets the CIO a seat at the table. And then when it comes time for renewal, hopefully they don't do a big tender process because they're so engaged with Logicalis and they love the service that we're giving them, that it's a natural sort of consequence of that engagement overall. And if they do go to market, then the efforts that we've made over the life of the contract will stand us in top position when it comes to them to review all those other competitors.
One thing I hear a lot about Logicalis is, it's the best kept secret in the channel. They're massive. They're £1.8 billion organisation, and yet it's not. You're well known in the UK, but the perception is you're not doing as well as you potentially could. So why do you think you're known as the best kept secret? It's a weird comment.
Yeah, well, I hate that. I mean, lots of vendors say it to me all the time. You're our best kept secret. I'm like, well, why are we a secret? It just frustrates me. There's no reason for us to be a secret. I think in part there's a brand question there. We've worked really hard over the last 4 years to enhance the brand. You might have heard that the tagline that Logicalis has now is the architects of change, and we talk about that encapsulating everything we do for our customers. The brand bit has been hard to establish because, believe it or not, in some markets, it's actually difficult for people to say Logicalis, right?
Like Spain.
Yeah, Spain, Logicalis. It's difficult for some people to say it. So that's not the only reason.
Are you going to change the name then?
No. We're sticking with it. But that's part of it. I also think that in many markets as well, we have a reputation, which I quite like this, that we're like the underdog. We're competing against these big organisations, and when we win against those organisations, it's a moment of real celebration for us. But that underdog mentality means that to a certain extent we do operate under a radar of some sort, which means that we're not the most well-known brand everywhere. However, those customers that do interact with us, where we've got long trusted relationships, they sing our praises all the time. We do an annual customer satisfaction survey, and the comments that we get from that, of course there are some comments that we need to address, but the overwhelming feedback is really, really positive, and that gives me a sense of satisfaction actually that we're doing the right thing.
You've recently appointed Neil Eek from Computer Centre, great signing.
Yeah.
But a couple of people have asked me in the past, said, ask Bob, are they investing in the UK? Are they going to pull out of the UK market because they've done some acquisitions in Europe? So how would you answer that?
Absolutely, we're investing in the UK. Absolutely, we're staying in the UK. No question at all about that. In fact, the appointment of Neil Leake hopefully gives some comfort that we are absolutely here to stay. It's no secret that our UK operation has been underperforming for several years, but actually now it's operating at a level that I'm satisfied with. What I'm confident is that Neil can take it to the next level in terms of its performance, and also, again, to sort of resurrect some of the brand power of Logicalis here in the UK. It's our backyard. We're globally headquartered here in the UK in Maidenhead. But I'm confident that Neil can actually help us make the UK business great again.
And high level, Bob, what's the sort of the strategy for expansion plans in the UK, and where do you see the sort of growth coming from?
Growth will certainly come from services, absolutely, both professional services and recurring services, annuity services. But actually, I think a lot of growth will come from really focusing very, very hard on the traditional market. There's still a tremendous amount of business to be done in the classic products, resale and implementation business overall. And software at the moment is massive, huge licensing opportunities around the world. So I think a lot of growth in the UK and more broadly from a Logicalis perspective will come in that traditional business as much as it will come in the more modern MSP business that we've developed over the last few years too.
You joined Logicalis as the CFO.
Yeah.
Then you got promoted to the COO, and then you got promoted again to the CEO. What's been the differences? What's been the change for you? Have you had to sort of learn new skills as you've been adapting to that, or has it been easy?
Well, it's nothing is easy, right? Nothing is easy in any job that I've ever done. The transition, though, is something that in all those different roles has been, I think, relatively straightforward. I think part of that is because I've always built strong relationships with individuals in any organisation that I've worked with, whether they're in the finance function or in the commercial function or in the sales function, or whatever it is, operations, whatever. And I think that stood me in good stead in those transition periods. I mean, probably thinking about the transition, the biggest challenge going from Chief Operating Officer to Chief Executive Officer was not necessarily due to the change in role as such, but it was because I became the Chief Exec on the 1st of March 2020. Now I think back to what's happening then. Like, the world locked down a few weeks after that, so it was dealing with immediate demands of the pandemic straight away, and making sure that our people around the world were safe and well looked after, and that we could give our customers a great service still despite the pandemic. So for the first 6 to 12 months, it was a real whirlwind trying to deal with all of those demands. I kind of didn't have a moment to think about, am I transitioning correctly into the CEO role? Because I was just in the thick of it. 30 territories around the world, exactly in the weeds, making sure that we were able to deal with both those general demands about our people being as safe and secure as possible and giving our customers the best possible service throughout. So I think after that, I never really looked back. I didn't really have a chance to say, gosh, did I transition well into the CEO role? Because from almost day one, I was right in there.
Did you have any doubts about your ability to do the job?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, every day. Not just the CEO role, but every role that I've ever done. From even when I went to university, I thought, do I really deserve this place on the law and politics degree that I did at Birmingham? Right the way through, I've always had those doubts. But I actually think that's good and that's healthy. Because it challenges you to make sure that everything you're doing is, as far as you're aware, the right thing to be doing. And that sort of constant questioning, I see it as a positive thing rather than a negative thing, and it actually pushes me forward overall, rather than being somebody who's like overconfident that of course I can do this in my sleep. I've never felt that about any role that I've done.
I often get asked, if I recruit for a company and the CEO or the leader has come from a finance background, they normally say to me, oh no, Mark, I've got to go and ask Bob for £10 for a paperclip, or I've got to go and get something signed off or something like that, or, he won't do my expenses until the end of the month, or it's just silly sort of things. And it's almost like, oh no, they're cutting costs and, there's nothing for the Christmas party. How do you strike the balance between efficiencies, cost cutting, but making it fun and attractive to join and making sure people like it, because there is a balance.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've been in some organisations where that balance isn't right, and I've had to correct that. But my guiding principle on this, Mark, is that we spend most of our lives at work, in the office, or wherever that might be, and there's got to be an element of fun about it. So I'm not a CFO in the past who would have gone in and cut all of those fun events like the Christmas party or that sort of stuff to save a few £100 here and there, or denied anybody the chance to buy some staples or something. Paperclips. Yeah, exactly. So there has to be an element of fun, and I've always respected that, and I've always taken part in that fun myself, because you spend most of your time at work overall. But there's got to be a certain amount of discipline that goes along with that as well, because particularly when you're in a senior role within a company, whether you're in the finance function or whether you're chief exec or a COO or whatever it might be, particularly when you're a director as well of an organisation, that brings with it certain responsibilities to safeguard the assets of the company without getting sort of too deep into this. That brings a certain responsibility. So you've got to have that balance right between disciplined approach to day-to-day activities and enough fun to keep people engaged and happy. And I've always felt that you need to earn the right to have fun. It's not a free-for-all. And if you work hard, then the company will reward you, not just in terms of financial stuff, but there'll be more engaging activities for you to get involved with, whether that's, President's Club activities for the sales force, or whether that's Christmas parties or team function meals out regular, that sort of stuff. I'm not the sort of person that would interfere or stop that sort of stuff, but there is a discipline that's required around earning those things.
Talking of discipline, £1.8 billion globally, or depending how you monitor it, could be 2.1 billion, depending how you register the actual revenue or recognise the revenue. How do you manage that in all those countries, in all those different stakeholders? It must be a minefield. So for the listeners, give an overview of your job. How do you manage your time?
Yeah, well, I said earlier we're in 30 territories around the world. That's Latin America, USA, UK, Ireland, various places in Europe, South Africa, lots of territories in Asia and Australia. So very, very broad, truly global capability. If all of those 30 territories reported directly to me, it would be completely unmanageable. So we have a regional structure. We have a Latin American leader, a leader for our US business. Our European territories in South Africa and UK report all direct to me. Have an Asian leader in Australia. So that sort of minimises it a little bit. But I've also got to be quite disciplined in terms of how my day is structured, because we go all the way from Australia right the way over to the Americas. I could start my day at 2 a.m. and finish at midnight or something like that if I let things get out of control. So, but I've got to have interactions with the team. So I start my working day normally between 6 and 7 in the morning with calls.
You're on calls at 6?
Calls, yeah, telephone calls or video calls. That can be quite challenging. Not every day, but most days of the week. And most days of the week that goes through until about 7 p.m. So, but of course in the bits in between or after that, my phone isn't off, so I'll get text messages. I can't help but check emails, and just before I go to bed at night, my wife always says it's the worst thing to do because you're going to be mind's going to be active all the way through. But I just think it's just the way I'm wired, and it's something I'll never be able to stop doing. I just have to be engaged. I have to understand what's going on. It's not a control freakery thing. It's just wanting to be aware of what's happening around the world.
And do you sort of split your time into looking at finances and stats and those sort of stuff and engaging with customers, or do you get involved with customers much?
I get involved with customers quite a lot, actually. And actually, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about being COO and CEO, having those conversations with customers. In fact, when I first became chief exec, when the period of lockdowns were unlocked, or whatever the phrase is, when we were able to travel again, I did a tour of Spain and Portugal and met several of our customers over there. And it was really interesting for me to ask them things like, so this is CIOs and IT directors, leaders in their market, questions like, talk to me about your priorities for the year ahead. And in that beginning period as CEO, that really helped inform my perspectives going forward and the way that I communicated with my leaders, not just in that Spanish.
You're getting feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But globally, it was really, really helpful. And that's why one of the big initiatives that we have in Logicalis is around sustainability. But that's where it started back in sort of late 2020, because all those customers were telling me that their CEOs were saying to them, shit, we've got to do something about reducing our carbon footprint, right? And you need to do your bit, CIO, so what are you going to do? And they were scratching their heads saying, oh, I don't know, and how can you help us with this, Bob? So that got me thinking about it, and that's why it's a big initiative for Logicalis around sustainability.
Let's talk about sustainability. Let's talk about that initiative. What are you actually doing? Because I want to give a bit of context to that, because I hear a lot of ESG, sustainability, noise going on. But when you actually go into the bonnet, nothing's happening. No customers are asking about it. There might be a tick box exercise, or because the customer is asking if you're doing it, you have to be portrayed as if you're doing something. So what are you actually doing around it?
Yeah, we've got lots of go-to-markets that help our customers improve their carbon footprint in the first instance. That's by trading in some of their older technology in an ethical way, taking back their old technology and disposing of it ethically, like recycling and all that sort of stuff, as well as supplying them with the most power efficient technology on the market. So it's a bit like your fridge at home. It'll be rated A or it'll be rated G or something like that. And when our customers are interested in sustainability, they want a partner that can supply them with A-rated products overall. So we take back old stuff, we dispose of it ethically, we provide them with new equipment which is more power efficient, therefore lowers their carbon footprint. We provide them with a managed service that gives them a sustainability score regularly, so they can understand exactly what the latest carbon footprint is of the environment we're managing for them too, amongst several other things. And I just want to say that because of our efforts in this space, because as you scratch away the surface, as you say, in some organisations, you find that it's all talk and no action, if you like.
Yeah.
Because of the efforts that we've made, we won Cisco's Global Partner of the Year for Sustainability at their most recent partner summit in Miami last year. So it's one of our biggest vendors recognising those efforts that Logicalis has made in this space, and I was really proud of that moment.
Fantastic. You produce a report, the CIO report. We do something very similar, like an annual salary survey, but you produce a report. Tell me a bit about that. Why do you do the report, and what does it cover?
So every year for the last decade, this is our 10th anniversary year, we've surveyed CIOs from around the world, their thoughts on a variety of industry trends and what's occupying their minds at the moment. So we do it to sort of keep our pulse on what's happening. It's a global survey, so it's representative of what everyone is thinking in the marketplace, if you like. The most recent one had about 1,000 respondents, so it's a significantly large sample size globally as well. So it's robust data. And so we do it to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on from a marketplace perspective. But the interesting thing is, because we've done it for 10 years now, we recently looked back at the results from 10 years ago, and it's really interesting to see what's hot now, what's front of mind for CIOs now, versus what was front of mind 10 years ago for them. And
what is it? What's changed?
So now, of course, there are some disruptive elements in the marketplace that they've got to respond to. Disruptive technologies, AI, of course, Internet of Things actually surfaced quite a lot in this year's report. 5G as topics for them to consider. That's disruptive technologies. There's disruptive threats. The cyber world, the security world is constantly on a CIO's mind overall. And there's disruption coming from regulatory authorities, like for example in the world of sustainability, where you've got to report various metrics and so on, and the IT department has a role to play in that. So significant disruption today. Go back 10 years ago, right, and this is quite interesting. The dominant theme 10 years ago was, I don't know if you remember, this concept of shadow IT. So this is where CIOs were kind of complaining that IT decisions that they previously used to make around technology choices were now being taken by functional heads. Like the CFO was determining what the ERP system was that they're going to use rather than the IT team. Or
because of cost, or
because well, actually,
this is the paperclip thing I've been talking about, Bob. See?
No, but it wasn't because of that. I tell you why it was. Because those departments never called it shadow IT. They just called it getting shit done. Right? and what that meant was that the IT department 10 years ago was seen as a blocker. The department likes to say no. You've seen the IT crowd probably on television, the guys down in the basement who just answer a phone call and say, have you switched it off and on again? And that's it. And I'm not saying that IT departments 10 years ago were all like that, but there was a perception certainly in those other functions that IT was too slow. not agile enough.
Yeah.
2017, 2018, the dominant theme then was digital transformation. That's where the CIO then started to reclaim his rightful place.
Bit of power.
Yeah, exactly. Back at the boardroom table, if you like, saying to the CEO, no, actually, we need to be involved in these decisions because we're the only people that can actually implement these outcomes for you overall. And that's not just digital transformation in the sense of like back-end infrastructure, public cloud, all that sort of stuff, but also in the sense of front-end customer-facing tools that consumers would use to engage with that organisation itself. So 2017, 2018, that's where the CIO started to move away from this complaining about shadow IT into, yeah, actually, I'm back now at the table making some decisions. And that's even more the case today because of the advent of AI and because of the pressure that CEOs like me are putting on their IT teams to say, what's our response to this? You know, how can we manage with these new emerging technologies and how can we develop them to our own advantage and not be left behind?
Do you have to, and it's a really good question, do you have to balance that internally at Logicalis? So you've got your internal service team, delivery team giving you X feedback, and then you've got the maybe the sales team or the marketing team giving you X feedback because they're getting the demand from the customer. Do you have a conflict there, like trying to manage both parties?
Yeah, well, the organisation is always trying to catch up with the sales and marketing team. I think that happens in a lot of organisations because they're right at the front of the developments in the marketplace. The feedback that we get from those teams is cutting edge, and I have to balance. Okay, is it the right thing for us to do right now? What I always try to do though is if we sell something, we've got to be using it or prepared to use it ourselves. And so there's a phrase that I've changed a little bit. We drink our own champagne at Logicalis rather than eat our own breakfast, or there are other phrases that are similar to that. We try things first ourselves. If it works for us, then we have confidence that we can sell it to our customers in all good faith too.
What does the CEO expect from the CIO? What should they be expecting in terms of feedback and service?
Well, look, of course, the CEO expects the IT environment to run smoothly. Basic sort of stuff around, keeping the lights on, that sort of stuff. We don't want the network to shut down. We don't want our data center to fail. We don't want feeds to drop. We want our devices to be available. We don't want connectivity issues, all that sort of stuff. And that's the basic table stakes job of the CIO to make sure that things continue running more smoothly. But these days, more and more, CEOs are looking for more strategic guidance from CIOs. How should we respond to the demands of AI? What can we do to capture this technology and harness it in our organisation? Can you give me some assurances that we're not going to be subject to the threat actors from a security perspective? I mean, the CIO survey is quite interesting because it says that something like 86% of organisations have allocated budget to AI activities within their organisation. How can they harness the power of AI? From a technology perspective, but also from a cyber perspective, out of those 1,000 plus CIOs that responded, 83% said that they'd suffered a cyber attack in the last 12 months. So I looked at that stat and I thought, gosh, that's quite high. But then I thought, but what about the other 17%? And in my mind, I can't help but think either they're too embarrassed to admit that they've suffered a cyber attack in the last 12 months, or there's a latent cyber attack in their environment that they don't yet know about overall, because it's
both worrying.
Yeah, exactly, both worrying. And 46% of organisations feel that they don't have the resources to deal with a cyber attack. So, 83% has happened already, and 46% think that they don't have the resources to deal with it. So there's a real sort of conflict there overall. And the CEO is expecting the CIO to manage all of this, in their IT function. So the pressures have only increased on the CIO. And as a consequence of that, I think that's why CIOs are going to have to seriously think about which activities within their IT function they manage themselves and which ones they partner with organisations like Logicalis and others to support them with overall. Because there's only so much time that they can spend dealing with these various conflicting demands.
2024, everyone is always talking about AI. AI this, AI that, how can we monetize it, how can we maximize it, how can we use it internally, how can we sell it, how can we get any cash from it? Where do you see the opportunity, and is Logicalis investing in AI with its customers or internally?
Yeah, well, so at Logicalis first, we've invested in some of the basic capabilities that generative AI brings. So looking at the way that we manage our organisations, we've created a generative AI tool that people can proactively search in things like, what's our policy on leave, annual leave, how much do I get a year? And it will give you the response straight away. Or even, how much annual leave do I have left in a year? And you get a response straight away. So that's good. Pretty sort of advanced generative AI utilisation overall. And we can work with our customers to implement similar sorts of tools in their environment too. We've also enhanced the platform that we use to provide managed services globally. We have the same platform, same instances in place everywhere around the world in those 30 territories. And we've enhanced that with AI capability such that the number of incidents that are reported, a lot of that is noise, a lot of that is caused by one root cause incident or event. And the AI that we've introduced, like machine learning AI capability beyond the generative AI, it's machine learning, that helps us get straight to that root cause more quickly and avoid us having to waste time on dealing with all of these distraction events overall, which means ultimately for our customers we can give them a quicker resolution time to their queries. Beyond that, from a go-to-market point of view, we've partnered with the likes of Microsoft and others to help them get their technology out in the marketplace from an AI point of view. For example, Copilot, the generative AI solution that Microsoft has at the moment. We work with them globally to sell that and to implement that to our customers and make sure that our customers know how to use it to get the most out of the tool.
If Logicalis got a big investment, multi-billion pound investment, and I know as a finance background you won't want to spend it, but if you had to place your bets on where you would do, if you're the global CEO and you're thinking, right, we're going to invest in this, we're going to invest in that, where would you place your bets this year in 2024?
I would increase the amount of investment that we make in our security capability globally. I think this is a massive concern for all organisations, big or small. And as the threat actors become more sophisticated and more clever in terms of how they penetrate customers' environments, customers are going to need some support in that space. So if I had unlimited resources or a big multi-billion-dollar investment, I would really focus on doubling down our capabilities in that space. We've got capability everywhere, but that's probably the thing that's going to explode this year even more than it has in the last 5 years. You might have expected me to say AI or something like that, or IoT, or actually we've got a reasonable IoT practice, we've got a reasonable 5G practice. I think they're sufficiently sized. But security is the one thing that we're absolutely doubling down on this year to make sure we can give our customers the assurance that they're looking for.
Bob, if you were to leave Logicalis, if we have a crystal ball, what would be one company that you think, do you know what, I'd like to go and work for those guys? It could be a vendor, it could be another partner, it could be anywhere in the channel. If you actually left
in the channel or anything at all,
anywhere, and something you'd be interested in. Is there anywhere you think you'd like to go and do?
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, I think some of the skills that I've learned dealing with different cultures in 30 territories over the last 8 years I've been on Logicalis could be quite helpful if I were to join the United Nations.
Right.
It's sort of the challenges I have from a day-to-day perspective, just sort of changing my the way I interact with individuals based on local habits and local cultures, and I think that's such a quite valuable skill that I've learned.
Absolutely. And my last question for you, Bob. 2024, it could be any organisation, but maybe something that's close to your heart that you've dealt with. Who's the one to watch? Who's the one company that's going to go and do really well in this year?
I think the organisation to watch, and you might say, well, you would say this, but the organisation to watch this year will be Cisco because of their acquisition of Splunk and how they integrate those capabilities into their security go-to-market and their full-stack observability piece. I think that's going to be very, very interesting for any Cisco partners, but actually for customers around the world. That combination from a security point of view will be really, really insightful and interesting for everyone to keep an eye on.
Brilliant. Bob, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.
Cheers.
Great.
That was great.
That was really good. That was really good.